What do you think is the most far-fetched / unrealistic thing the show has ever done? Ooh. Edit surprise, I haven't seen anyone mention Grey pushing caution in front of a tube Central London and getting away with it. This is by Garrett Plate, or Gerard Plate.
Yeah.
This might be Gerard Way's
obviously the first joke is the Gavin and Stacey. Oh well, I've not watched EastEnders since Den Watts came back from the dead. Went too far, that one. I don't remember the rest of the quote. I don't remember the clip, but I know the line. That's, I mean, look, soaps are a weird thing because through the passage of time, you can start to erode away some of the boundaries you've set up. In 85, they're not bringing back anyone from the dead, let's be honest. That's just not happening. It's too unrealistic. That would never happen. It just wouldn't happen. But through time and through public perception, they brought back Den Watts from the dead, which is still absolutely mental. It is still wild. Because, yes, we didn't see the body, but even then as a trope, something that's supposed to be depicting real life, it doesn't happen, does it? Like, there's, rare one-off examples where it's like, I have fled the country and faked my own death. I'm never going back. It's like, bloody hell, all right then. And yeah, sure, witness protection and stuff like that, that does happen, that does exist. But characters genuinely being brought back from dying, it's kind of wild. And it's always interesting to see how they do it. Those probably are the most unrealistic things. These moments when EastEnders went too far and bringing back characters from the dead. There's just so many things you build up, and it's just kind of crazy, honestly. Yeah. But I think that's a part of the charm of a soap, right? You want these things to be able to happen. Sometimes you want a character to have a lovely little storybook ending, a perfect fitting ending for the character. And then sometimes you get the more realistic perspective, like Lola's death, for example, where it's like, fucking Jesus, that's rough. That's absolutely rough, that. Oh, God. So yeah, there's a lot to pick from in terms of far-fetched or unrealistic. It'd just be just most of the deaths, really. There's a lot of the deaths. Some of them are really ridiculously stoic. The car crashes, Phil Mitchell being married a lot. There's just so many far-fetched things. But I will happily read what people say. Well, yeah. You will.
Brought Kathy and Cindy back from the dead. Ian thinks his family is bloody invincible. He's waiting for Lucy to rise from the grave. One more reply. What's this? Yes, absolutely. I think he could have got away with Kathy if they met. Kidnapping / held hostage backstory, rather than she's just been along with it willingly for an insurance scam. But Cindy, after 25 years, is really too much. She didn't die though. She was in witness protection.
She technically died in prison.
Yeah.
Well, they technically brought her back from the dead.
Okay.
Because as a character, she was technically dead, and then they changed it.
Phil and Ian...
I'm willing to buy the story, right? She routed the wrong people, witness protection. It makes sense in my brain. The reason was good enough for me to wave it away. And Kathy's was fine as well. It was her being trapped by Gavin, who made her give up her life in Walford and left. So checks out.
Ian and Phil having unbelievable success with women. Yeah. Martin being crushed.
Yeah. Nobody keeps it real like Ian Beale.
Yeah.
That's what I'll say. Whatever that means, the women all know.
Martin being crushed by a bush, then just plodding around afterwards like nothing happened. Fair enough.
Yes, did happen.
Don't forget, he just...
But before we do this, though, let's just... I know usually when these sorts of videos happen, you have people just being like, yeah, it's EastEnders. This isn't us, emphatically screaming about... We're mostly just taking other people's opinions and broadcasting them as such. I like the aspect of a soap where it's far-fetched. I'm a Hollyoaks fan, for crying out loud. I love a bit of extra storytelling knobbery that wouldn't happen in real life. But in my brain, soaps are like real life, but without all the boring bits. And that's the fun. You get these characters who are larger than life, and they are propelling stories forward. I love it. I do. Like, this isn't like they need to change this now. Nah, they don't. They're doing perfectly fine as they are. I'm content with how they're all going. Just in case people like, what? You're taking it too serious. This is just a discussion point, guys.
Yes. Don't forget to get half his liver and practically bouncing around afterwards. And both Lauren and Bradley fell off the roof.
Oh, you missed the pun. His behaviour towards his health and well-being has never been fouler. Fantastic. Good work. Good work.
Also, what is this by this? Yeah, I already said it's by Gareth Blake. When Lauren and Abby fell off the roof with their brother Bradley also falling off it and dying, that was a step too far for me. Oscar has done the smart thing by staying away from the square. No crazy storyline for me, just the lack of CCTV in the square is mind-boggling.
Yes.
Max and Wilmot Brown forming a Legion of Doom. That Irish gangster with the cane, Mick falling in love with Janine of all people. I'm surprised Tanya burying Max alive hasn't been mentioned. Even with Sean involved, it was just so unbelievable that Tanya would go through with it. Would Tanya talk and fantasize about it? Yes, I could see her doing that. But it just seems so absurd to me that I would actually unfold in front of her eyes. Dawn...
It is a bit excessive. But obviously, what they're mentioning is how Tanya and Sean bury Max Branning alive. After the constant back and forth are like, Tanya, she's finally not going to be on Max anymore. She's gotten back with him. Why? Why have you done it again? You're doing it to yourself again. He's going to cheat on you again, Tanya. For Christ's sake, please stop. And she finally gets with Sean, and her and Sean just decide, time for revenge. Let's hurt him in the worst way possible. Because there was a thing in Max's history where I'm pretty sure, I don't know if he was necessarily buried alive, but he was trapped and is deathly claustrophobic. So it is really cruel. But Tanya is kind of at wit's end, and she had been particularly harmed throughout a lot of Max's actions. So in a way, you can kind of get it. I think it was either. I think at first it was said to be Derek. It was first said to be Jim who locked him in a box or whatever. But they ended up changing it to say it was Derek who trapped him in there, which gave him lifelong problems.
Yeah, Dawn being not only willing to be in a relationship with Gary, but also having an affair with Phil. Most unrealistic love triangle ever.
The joke is Dawn's a very attractive woman, and she's getting with 2 eggs.
I'm usually pretty accepting of the show's over-the-top plots. Does anyone remember those ghastly Walford and Bloom episodes? I feel like they just threw everything on the ball to see what stuck off for the sake of creating some disaster. So first we get a gas explosion, fine. Then Max gets fired to a restaurant, okay. But wait, Johnny gets shot and then the ambulance gets hit by a lorry. It's like the writers had a bunch of random ideas and just shoved it all into a set of episodes, hoping it would work. Remember when the GP surgery opened on the square? Fuckers were getting on the day, sit down appointments. The entire Beale family not being arrested back in 2016 when the police found out they were covering for Bobby for years. It's actually a good point. I never really thought about that deeply. About Jane literally putting Lucy's body in her boot and left her in the woods. Maybe the police thought she had already been through enough after Bobby hitting the stick with her. Hockey stick. Phil acting like a ruthless murderer who's willing to kill someone over a petty affair and taunt the guy's mother over it, even though a big part of Phil's character in the past was his guilt over accidentally killing someone in an arson job in the 90s. The point caused him to become an alcoholic in the first place. And since then, he's always had a certain line where he couldn't bring himself across, like when he straight up told Jack Dalton that he doesn't kill people, or when he refused to kill Archie Moon, despite his mother telling him not to. In the past 10 years or so, the writers clearly didn't want to bother reading up on the character's history, and just took his character at face value. Oh. yeah, reading on. The fact that everyone gets knocked out cold, put in a coma, yet no one suffers long-lasting neuro damage. Not to mention Patrick's miracle recovery from his stroke doesn't even slur his speech anymore. It's not how it happens in the real world. Short, I'm a specialist neurological physiotherapist. 3/4 of the square should have chronological problems from traumatic brain injuries. The other ones that seem to be affected are the writers. Just about everything. Most of all, people constantly moving from residence to the other, even when they don't really know each other. The stupid baby swap storyline, that dumb Mac revenge storyline. I hate the baby swap storyline so much. Completely unrealistic for a groove mother to swap her dead baby with one that's alive. So no, Ronnie was a fucked up individual dealing with loads of unresolved trauma. But I really doubt any mother who just lost a baby, no matter what they previously went through, is going to take a child that isn't hers and hasn't formed an attachment with. I don't have an issue with the swap itself. That can happen in hospitals. Being real life stories based on it. They picked the wrong circumstances in that storyline. That was what was made it so unrealistic that they originally intended on for years. I'm glad Sam Woodyard chose to leave before they could progress that idea, even if her reason to leave was not long after that, unrelated to this storyline, which she has since claimed. Which some gangster locked Phil in a room with a bottle of whiskey and he actually caved in and drank it.
The alcoholic drinks booze. Cal Surprise. The baby swap storyline, just to roll back to that one, within the context of how tragic Ronnie was in terms of children, I mean, first it was a step too far, really. They really should have just let her have baby James. At the end of the day, they really should have. I don't know why they decided to go this angle. In a way, it's a really dark and interesting portrayal of trauma and a trauma response to something so incredibly messed up, like witnessing your baby die and trying to swap your child for someone else's. It's really dark, and that's why it had a lot of complaints, because at the end of the day, it probably doesn't have a place in EastEnders. I think, like, I do believe they would have done it really well, fundamentally, if they had have gone through with it. But obviously, it got a lot of bad, negative press reaction and media reaction, so ultimately, they had to stop the storyline. It is a bit of a strange one to suggest that they would believe that, like, you know, you saw your baby like an hour ago, suddenly it's dead and looks slightly different. You know, it's a bit of a stretch, but like, I still generally believe that it would have been a really interesting way to portray really, really excessively bad trauma. And it would only have worked for a character like Ronnie Mitchell, who, you know, cripplingly wanted a child, but was never, either the child she did have, she wasn't allowed to be there for. And when she did finally see her, she died in front of her. Like, when she saw her as her own child, which she didn't realize, she died right in front of her. And then they have baby James, who then dies very quickly on. Like, with how messed up Ronnie's life was, you definitely could have gone that direction. But, you know, whether they would have had the right amount of tact or the right amount of severity, like seriousness to deal with that storyline's another thing entirely. But at the end of the day, you know, it got shelved, and it was probably the right decision.
Yeah, I don't know whether to continue on or just leave at the baby swap storyline. What do you reckon?
A funny little one. Making Keanu a weak man. It ruined the character until his death in 2023.
Alright.
What do you mean, a weak man?
And that is the video. Thank you for watching. Leave your suggestions down below, and we will see you in the next one. Bye bye.